Welcome to Makers at Mailchimp. This is so exciting, y'all. I'll tell you a little bit about how we've come to be here. But I'm Ann Collins. I'm the Director of Employee Experience here at Mailchimp. I have amazing coworkers that woo me, which is awesome. So I'd like to get an idea of who's in the room. So if you're a Mailchimp employee, can you please stand up? Hey, Mailchimp. All right, sit down. If you're a guest of Mailchimp, please stand up. So great. So when we started curating the invite list for this, my idea was, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we had like 25% non-Mailchimp people that we could network with and expand our network? And it kind of flipped, which is really awesome. So I think it's about 60% guests. So welcome, guests. Great to have you. Okay, let's be honest. When y'all got the invitation from me or someone else, did any of you, by a show of hands, say, what the heck is Makers? Yeah, me too. 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, my boss, Marty Wolf, who's our Chief Culture Officer, invited me to go to the Makers event, which is being held right now in California. And I was like, yay, I get to go to California, but what the heck is Makers? And even when I went to the website, and maybe you guys did the same thing, I couldn't quite figure it out. It was a bunch of like fabulous women with a few Makers men thrown in there. But when I got there and was a part of the event, like my brain exploded with joy. It was so inspiring. It made me want to come back and change the world. So last year, when we were coming back, we were on the plane, I said to Marty, wow, what if we could bring some of this magic back to Atlanta in a Makers and Mailchimp event? And she said, go for it. That's what Marty always says. So here we are. Thank you, Jackie. You're my best wooer. So, sorry, my note cards are getting all messed up here. When I started thinking about who we'd want to speak at the Makers at Mailchimp event, I thought immediately of Holley Murchison. Holley, we met kind of by accident a couple of years ago, and we stayed in touch, and I knew there'd be some time or place when we'd have a great time together. And so I want to introduce you to Holley Murchison with Oratory Glory.
Thank you, Ann. I like how you keep your intros. You're like smooth and easy. We had a good time. Come on up. How are you all feeling? Yes. That's it. My work here is done. You're my favorite kind of audience. Okay. I get the privilege of spending the next 45 minutes with you here. So one, thank you for your energy. I can feel it radiating. What Ann forgot to mention, and I'm going to throw the hashtag in there. Since this is the first Mailchimp Makers event, we made up a hashtag for it. It's Makers X Mailchimp. Makers X Mailchimp. So that when folks click, they know just how lit the experience was, right? So I also have a hashtag. So if you've got pens, I'm not going to make this too complicated tonight, but we've got two hashtags. Yes. This is going to be good. Okay. So we've got Makers X Mailchimp, and if over the next 45 minutes anything feels moving or resonates with you in our conversation, I ask that you use the hashtag 8lessonsinlove. It's on the bottom of most of the slides, so I made it super, super simple. But before we do get started, I want to share just a short video to help offer some context for what direction our conversation is headed tonight.
Growing up in the 80s in the crack era in Harlem showed me a lot of what the dark side of the world could be. But when you're in a community where everyone is lifting each other up, you see the bright side of things. As a kid growing up in a city like New York, it's very fast-paced, and if you don't speak up for yourself, it's easy to get swept away. And I was actually a really, really shy kid growing up. I was an introvert. Though I was quiet, I was always absorbing. And so I learned a lot of different people's communication styles, what made them tick, what pisses people off, what makes them happy, what gets them to really do. Over time, there were these opportunities that presented themselves. And if you don't learn to speak up for yourself, others will. And you may not like the story that they're telling about you. found my voice through being present. I think there's something really special about showing up, right? In our lives, so much fear comes up from the things we're like afraid to do or afraid to try. And for me, owning my voice came from feeding my curiosity. You're owning your voice to leave your mark. It's like, imagine you're here for 75 years and you never spoke up for anything you believed in, or you never shared an idea that you thought could really change something. And I really think that in being here, if we're going to be here, there is a necessity to add value somewhere. And if you're not adding, you're subtracting. So in owning your voice, you create an opportunity for yourself to really leave a mark once you're gone.
I like you all. You're a good group. So as I'm sure you can imagine, I think a lot about the word legacy. And your standard dictionary will give you a range of different definitions, but I like to think about it as the impact that your choices, your body of work, all of the things that you're made up of leave on the world and the people around you. So just to do kind of a check, hey folks up there, can you make some noise if you give a damn about the legacy you leave behind? Okay, good. That means I'm in the right place, and that brings me to exactly what we are here to be in conversation about tonight. Love. And I am of the belief, as a person who's relentlessly committed to leaving a mark on the world, to dying empty and pouring it all out, I think that love is the ultimate compass for leaving a legacy behind. But I think it's important that we offer some kind of definition up for love. So I like to define love as the verb love, right? The act of finding the things that you would die for and choosing to live for those things instead. Vulnerably, courageously, and unconditionally. And so as I share my 8 lessons in love with you tonight, these are the lessons that help me recalibrate that compass for leaving a legacy behind when I'm feeling overwhelmed and anxious or afraid or any combination of those things. When the shit feels like it's hitting the fan, these are the things that bring me back to myself. That's your line? You say that often?
I was like, yes, Mom.
Oh, okay, good. I like that. I was like, that's your line? You say that a lot here? That's not good. So, lesson 1, find your jams. I'm assuming that a lot of us have multiple jams here, and I'm not talking about the kind that you spread. Or maybe you do. Talk to me at dinner if that is the case for you. But when I say jams, I mean the things that move you to the point where you would do them without getting paid, right? But finding your jam requires some sort of exploration. So in my pursuit of finding my jams, you saw in the early video, I'm a curious kid from New York. It's a city where you get to explore everything all the time. And I explore my jams professionally. And I ended up working 23 plus jobs over 15 years in 7 different industries. So those jobs look like a lot of things, from Trader Joe's, because who doesn't love Trader Joe's? You go in. Everyone looked so happy at Trader Joe's that I was just like, I need to work here. And so I worked at Trader Joe's to understand the customer service experience, right? We know we go in, it feels like a fantastic, and I was like, oh, okay, if I'm gonna serve people well, Trader Joe's might be a place to learn how to acquire that specific skill set. I've done project management at a contracting firm, helping architects, designers, contractors build beautiful homes from the ground up. We've got some contracting firm folks here today. I like this. I've taught middle school, high school, college, adult. If there are middle school teachers in here tonight, God bless you. God bless you. I've directed camps. I have been a program director for education nonprofits. I've done accounting at a tax firm with someone else's tax preparer number, which I'm saying on camera, but I trust you all. So during those 23 jobs, and I'm sure a lot of you, if you've worn a lot of hats, we know the challenge is finding the common thread. And I knew that over that 15 years, there were 3 core jams that stood out every time. Unconventional learning and education. I'm a figure it out on your own kind of kid. The public school experience in New York City, if you've been through the system, is not the best of the best. And so I found myself spending time at the library, designing different experiences for myself. I love the unconventional path of learning to keep myself curious and to help other people grow. The second jam was communication and storytelling. I think just as a Black, queer woman, oral tradition is huge culturally for me, and I know that communication is probably the one skill that you need no matter what job you're working in. I love the power of stories to unite us, unfortunately sometimes to divide us, but those were 2 of the 3 jams, and the third was alchemy. Any fans of the book The Alchemist here? That was the first time I learned the word alchemy, and I was like, ooh, yeah, let's turn some lead to gold. So I don't mean it in the literal sense, but I do mean that my jam is transformation. Whether I'm working with people or companies or teams, I find joy in helping people take the parts of them that they perceive to be lead and turn them into gold, right? So we're jamming at this point, right? We have found our jams. And I started to think a lot about, but what do you do when you have all these jams? When you can't find a job that allows you to stretch and expand in the ways that you want to, applying these things, well, you build your own bridge. Yes. So I started to think about, what does it look like to make these jams overlap somehow? And I came up with a crazy idea with some friends of mine. This is my crew from the Hall Pass Tour, and it was the first business that I started. So I knew the jams of unconventional learning, communication and storytelling, and alchemy were my thing. And I know that I'm passionate about music, culture, education, the arts. So I was studying television and radio at Brooklyn College. I met the gentleman with the locks on the far end with the pose. He was a rapper who goes by Science, and he came out with an amazing project called The Hall Pass. All of the songs corresponded with a subject. There was recess, which is not a real subject, but technically you can learn a lot at recess, right? So there was astronomy. There were all of these different songs on the project, and I knew that Science majored in Africana Studies and business management because he wanted to manage his career as an artist while staying true to his cultural roots. So I said, yo, it would be dope if we took these songs and we just started throwing concerts in schools to get kids excited about carving out their own learning path. What you think? He was like, cool, let's do it. And the curly-haired woman on the end, Janelle, called me no more than 3 days later, and she said, you'll never guess what just happened. I just performed for 300 middle schoolers in Ticonderoga, New York. I told them my story. I was like, okay, this is a serendipitous moment. So Science raps, Janelle sings, she studied classical music. I said, let's start a tour, let's take the show on the road. She said, cool. I started cold calling high schools. It's laughable now, but I was so determined. I was like, hey, can we come do a concert at your school? They're like, what are the details? I was like, I don't have details yet, but like, I just wanted to put it out there and see, you know, some people thought I was nuts. And ultimately, we met with a nonprofit who had a network of 500 schools across the country. We pitched the idea to them. They said, sounds good, do it. And so overnight, I became a tour manager and a host, because I studied television and radio, of a concert tour that was gonna travel the country. I was like, okay, I need to recruit some homies. So I made some calls to some friends, and we formed a crew. We had a videographer, a photographer, a merch manager, because we needed a merch manager. And we set out to reach schools and get kids excited, not just about learning, but about the power they had in navigating their own path, blazing their own trail. So we started with 5 schools. We ended up traveling all around the country. I can talk to you about it. It's much more fun if I show you what it looked like. So my guy, Buddy, in the back is gonna turn the volume down so we can make it like really like, I can narrate over the video and we make it real cool. So this is a school that we went to in Delaware, and we intentionally went to both urban and rural communities so that we could see where the challenges existed for students. We did some elementary schools, some middle schools, and we just decided, what does it look like to turn someone's cafeteria or their auditorium into Madison Square Garden. So we ended up traveling around the country for 3 years doing this. We reached about 15 states, 20,000 students in their communities. And what made it unique was it wasn't just a concert. And you'll see in this video, we recruited student ambassador teams to take the role of planning their own concert at their own school. The ambassador teams weren't enough. We facilitated workshops in all of the schools to teach students dream development, essentially. It's like, how do you take the resources you have and turn them into gold, because alchemy, right? So this was a ton of fun. We got to travel the country doing it, but it brought me to an interesting turning point. I realized that I was really good at the concert thing. Sometimes it's hard, and I'm sure some of you can attest to this, to let go of an idea that's been your baby for 3 years. So I was like, I just want to hold on to this. Let's just do concerts like forever and ever. But one of the key pieces of our concerts was that in all of the schools we went to, we had students be the opening acts for Janelle and Science. And every student, when they came on stage, had to share what their passions were and how they thought some form of higher learning might help them get there. But the gap was that I realized these students didn't have public speaking at school. So I was like, oh wait, put them on stage in front of 300 people with no formal training. Can't do that, right? And so I found that my love for communication and storytelling, that jam really stood out, and I loved coaching students when they were on stage. And it was a moment for me to say, okay, am I gonna hall pass tour it for the next 7 years and be like 45 hosting middle school concerts? Or am I ready to pivot and do something different? And so I made a leap. And that leap was when I thought about all of the students in high schools and colleges and middle schools who weren't able to effectively communicate, my mind immediately jumped to the adults who couldn't do the same. And I thought about all my friends and peers who were in positions for years and years, but couldn't advocate for themselves to move forward, or had ideas that they wanted to pitch, but they were afraid to talk about them in public. And I was like, okay, this cucumber, I'm gonna explain in a minute. That is a cucumber, by the way. I was like, this cucumber is a ticket. What if I took this communication idea, this public speaking idea, and started teaching it to adults? So in New York City, there is an organization headquartered called Skillshare. And when Skillshare first started, it was all in person. And the idea was that you can learn anything from anyone. So I took a bunch of my homegirls to a class called How to Teach a Skillshare class. And I was like, we have to take our skills and start offering them up to other people. I had no idea what I was gonna teach, but my homegirl who works in HR was like, you should teach public speaking. And I was like, all right, but all adults hate public speaking. Can you raise your hand if you enjoy public speaking from me? Okay, we got one. We know, I knew from the beginning. But there were about like 7.5 hands that went up out of like 130 plus, right? So I was like, okay, what is the allure of public speaking? And I was like, I'm gonna call this workshop, Cool as a Cucumber, How to Master Public Speaking. And I got my friend Vaughn to design a cucumber for me, right? So the idea was that if adults in the workplace have the skills and the tools to communicate as their best selves, they're gonna slay it at work, they're gonna make better connections, they're gonna be more confident about the work that they do, and moreover, the company will do well. You can serve the vision well when at first, at your core, you know how to serve your highest self. So I taught this workshop. I doodled down a 2-hour workshop on paper, had my slides. First class, I opened it to 10 people. 7 were my closest friends, they came. I charged like $10. It sold out, success, right? And then an interesting thing happened. People started asking me to teach it again, and again, and again, and I probably taught this class like 75 times over 2 months, over 2 years, not 2 months, wow. I'm an overachiever, but that's too much, that's too much. So I taught it and taught it, like 300 people had it on their watch list, and I was like, okay, we're really onto something. And then people started asking, can you come teach this at my company? Absolutely. Can you coach me? Sure, I can coach you. And now I've been coaching speakers for 6 years now. Can you come to my school and teach this? Absolutely. I said yes to pretty much everything. And then I came to this crossroads, right, of needing to decide what I was in it for. And again, that hall pass tour idea of like, am I gonna host concerts for the next 45 years? So I had to sit with the question, are you trying to be the best public speaking instructor in the world, or is there more to this? And in the decision to decide what I was in it for, I had to decide that I was okay with it being bigger than me. And that was hard, because it was very safe to just say, I'm gonna do some public speaking workshops, and that's gonna be it, that's it. But when I really thought about it, I was like, oh, this is bigger than a public speaking workshop. At the seat of everything we do, I think our foundational infrastructure is in the way we communicate. And not just at work, a lot of our communication is broken at home, with our friends and families. I know we're all, I don't want to use the word guilty because I don't want you to feel guilty, but I know there are a lot of relationships that struggle because of ineffective communication. And so I thought about Oratory Glory as an opportunity to rectify that, to humanize the way the world communicates. So 65 workshops later, I said, oh, wait, I have a business. Let me really think about how can I go into companies and help them rethink how they communicate with each other, how that communication can enhance their relationships, and how that can help them do better work. But I learned a lot through that process of teaching college students, of teaching corporate companies, and of speaking at conferences about communication. And of the 5,000 plus folks that I've worked with, whether they were students, musicians, creative professionals, executives, they all struggled with one question. So before they could communicate effectively about their work or tell one team what the other team was up to, they struggled with the stories they were telling about themselves. And by a show of hands, if you really love the question, tell me about yourself, can you raise your hand for me? Checking up top, let me check all the, that's just a straight up no, okay, got it. So for all of the sessions that we facilitate, there's always a survey, where are your communication hurdles, and everyone talked about the barriers and the lack of confidence they felt when it came to communicating who they are and what they do. So I ended up going on this 3-year learning and teaching journey. And it started with a friend. When I was working at an education nonprofit, she asked me, can you teach us how to introduce ourselves as a training and a staff retreat? I was like, yeah, I can do that. So I pulled out some Post-its and I doodled down what's the simplest method, and I came up with this 6-step method for accurately and artfully defining who you are, right? And I tested it on the staff, it worked, and I kept teaching it to more and more people, similar to the ones that you saw in the slides before. And I was like, oh, wait, I'm onto something, right? If we have a method for articulating our true north, what could that change for us? And I was like, oh, okay. I feel like I've said the word communication like 75 times. But you all know where I'm going with this, right? So tell me about yourself became a method that I started teaching. I was going door to door like Jesus. And I was like, this is not a sustainable way to share an idea. Like once I realized that it was catching on and people liked it, and more importantly, that it was useful to folks, I said, how do you take a method and turn it into a platform? And so the first was learning experiences. I taught it as a story lab, helping companies think through what story they were telling if your company were a human, helping teams identify like what does the marketing team do, and then having people talk about their individual roles in that big picture. So Team A, which I like to call it, became a thing. And I was like, okay, learning experiences, I can't go and physically teach the whole world, so what's next? We created a book. And so the book, which came out 2 Septembers ago, and there's an Oprah moment coming, don't you worry. Not like Oprah coming physically, but there is a, can't make those promises. But there is a gift in this for you tonight. So I put it in a book, right? And I thought about what kind of case studies and interviews can I share in this book to help people use this method to shift their work. But the book wasn't enough because not everybody likes to read. And when you think about like self-help books, the idea of a self-help book is like alluring at first until you're alone with the work. And you're like, I don't really want to do this. And I know I won't even tell you about my self-help book collection of books at home that look good on the shelf, you know, one day. So we did an audio book and we did a podcast. And it was like, oh, now we can have conversations about people teaming, so that I can inspire other people to begin to share their stories. So there was a crossroads there. And I think for the multidisciplinary folks who are obsessed with their work. I'm talking about myself. I got a little lost in it. And I know some of you, you know that feeling when you get lost in the work, when you're like, oh, wow, I've been on this for like 7 hours. I should probably eat something. I should probably pee, right? So I got really lost in the sauce of the work, so much so that there was no harmony in my life. It was just, I'm a Virgo to the core. It was like work, 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 work. Let's get it done. But in losing myself, I remembered when I decided what I was in it for, but I forgot why I was in it. And I had to find my faith again. And I know this is kind of a taboo thing to talk about, but I already dropped Jesus like 5 minutes ago. I promise I'm not going to take it too far, right? But you're like, do it. So in finding my faith, I needed to remember my why, what I believed in again. And this Quincy Jones quote has become one of my favorites. I tell the kids and I tell the proteges, always have humility when you create and grace when you succeed, because it's not about you. You are a terminal for the Most High. As soon as you accept that, you can do it forever. And I was like, wow, Quincy, you did that. You did that. And when I say I got lost in the work, I was super anxious all the time. I had bouts of depression that I couldn't comprehend or understand. I turned to addiction, right? I think there's something, the first thing you learn about marijuana is that you can't get addicted to it. That's a lie. So living in the Bay Area, I was like, I gotta keep my New York hustle up, so let me get, you know what I'm saying? We have oh, you're from the Bay? Yes. Okay, I see you. So I was like, okay, weed is a thing. It's a social thing. All right, if I smoke, I can stay focused, I can keep my head in the game, and I did. And then it became so habitual that I was like, oh no, wait, this is a problem. But instead of doing the healing work and finding my faith, I just kind of sunk deeper and deeper into it, which allowed me to stay lost in the sauce. So in finding my faith, I had to figure out what healing looked like for me, and I had to stop running to my work to do it. Work used to be my safe space, but it wasn't anymore. And so I did this deep exploration, and I think we don't talk about how connected creativity and spirituality are. And when I say spirituality, I'm not talking about religion. I like to think of spirituality as the things that bring you back to yourself so that you can commune with whatever higher power you believe in, whatever larger thing, whatever thing bigger than you is. And I dug into everything. Started reading books on astrology, started learning more about tarot, started spending time by the water, started thinking about cultural ceremonies that my ancestors had done. I was like, I need to just do an upheaval and find my way back to myself. And I did. And I think for me, this being the love lesson of finding the things that you would die for and living for them instead, vulnerably, courageously, unconditionally, the finding of my faith really tested those things. But it brought me to a place where I could allow my story to change. And for someone like me, I grew up in Harlem in New York City. I'm the middle child of 5. I grew up in poverty. And I was hanging on to this story, this mindset of like poverty mindset, but it didn't fit me, right? And so I needed to have a new story that represented the person whose faith had changed. And in allowing my story to change, I was like, oh, okay, this victim story of like, woe is me, it's so hard, I can't try, like it hurts to try. I had to look myself in the mirror and like, okay, we can't do that anymore. That actually doesn't work. And allowing my story to change, it opened up my world to entirely new things. That's my head, that's my world being open, right? And what you're actually seeing is my work being able to expand. So with Tell Me About Yourself, the book, it was like a one-person show. I've traveled around the country and spoken about it and all of these things, and that was great. But what you're seeing here is the manifestation of collaboration, right? Allowing our story to change frees us from ourselves so that we can be in partnership with other people. And most recently, like literally yesterday actually, I was laughing with Ann, like, this is a big week. I have this big project launching. So for Tell Me About Yourself, my goal when I released the book was like, we need to sell 100,000 copies. If this book is my first album, I want the book to go platinum. And I decided that 100,000 was that number, right? And then someone from WeTransfer reached out to me, and we talked about how we can collaborate to turn the book into a digital experience. And that's something that before I would have been like, no, it's my baby, it's my idea, I gotta keep it safe and tucked away here. But when I allowed my story to change, it opened me up to a new possibility. And so yesterday, this released on WeTransfer's content site, We Present, and we worked together to create a digital experience for the book so that people who have different learning modalities can experience the book. It's a bunch of cool micro podcasts and illustrations. That's not what I'm here for, but this was the allowing of my story to change, right? But there's something tricky about you let the story change, you found your faith, but I didn't want to dip into that old place because it's so easy for me to spend a full day on work. I had to get a life. And I literally mean, like, get a life. I was at a conference last year, and one of the organizers had asked me, like, what are you up to? Like, what do you do for fun? And my mind went blank. I was like, work is fun. Like, what do you mean? Like, it's fun. And she was like, when you're not working. And I was like, oh, wow. I had a come to Jesus moment. And I was just like, well, my first response was, when I used to have fun. And that's when I knew something needed to shift, right? So in the getting of a life, I was like, what do I need to change to allow me to sustain this new story, right? This story of this full person who can do anything, who is not married to work, who knows that balance actually just means harmony. And sometimes you might be 80% work, 20% play. Sometimes you might be 60-40. My math is on point today. I needed to get a life, and it started with my personal relationship. So first, I got married. Literally in December. And so I just got a life. But I think when we talk about relationships, right, it's the people we're in partnership with. It's literally taking inventory on who we want to be in our circle. This is my helpmate, my business partner, all of the things, my bestie. So we got married, and that was like, okay. Because as someone who was a lone wolf, and I spent a lot of my time just kind of like lone wolfing through things, that's not real. We know the proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I'm choosing far together, like for life. That's my thing. The second thing in getting a life was I made a list of all of the things, these are my real life notes. I made a list of all of the things that I want to manifest for myself between now and 2021. I don't care how they manifest. I know they may take shape in a different way, but I was like, oh, I have to get real about the things that I want. The things that I've crossed out is because I came back to it and I was like, you didn't really want that. Like, you just saw that on the gram and it looked sexy, but you know, that's not for you, right? I think it's really important to remember that when we're creating change and when we're thinking about the things that we want to make, we don't have to make like everyone else does. Like, it's really important that what you make is authentic to you. And so I made sure that this list was a reflection of that. So I crossed out the stuff that was like, you just made that up. You don't really want that. And some of the things are things that have already come to pass. So I'm like, okay, I've done the work of the brain dump. Now, what do I need to do? Who do I need to grow into in order to make those things happen? And I told you all earlier, unconventional learning is my thing. So I was like, I'm gonna make myself a learning and development plan. I wish I could express externally how that makes me feel on the inside, but there really are no words. So one of my favorite things in college was when you get the catalog with the classes. You all know what I'm talking about? Oh, that was the best. Choosing my classes, going through, and I was like, okay, well, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't work for a traditional company. I need to do this for myself. And this is what I do for companies and teams and people all the time. So I made up new courses of study for myself. I was like, okay, if I want to get a deal with Disney Pixar by 2021 to voice over a movie, I should probably start learning like some kind of improv or taking some classes. And these are my initial doodles of like the things that I wanted to take. The other post-it is just a song that came to me in the process. And I went to Dropbox Paper and I made myself a personal learning and development plan. And these are my core things, right? So I've got communication and storytelling, spirituality and freedom, fashion and fashion tech, creativity and ideation, leadership and impact entrepreneurship, and music and performance. And I didn't want to go too crazy because if you click all of those little curses and drop down, there's literally classes I want to take, books that I want to read, all of the things. It's like if we graduate college and that's where the learning stops, then really we're stunning our growth, right? So I made a learning and development plan for myself, and there's play in all of those things so that I can make sure I don't lose myself in the work again. So I got a life. I have a life. I was affirming that for myself. That one wasn't for you. I've got a life. So then in the getting of a life, right, we get to start over. And lesson 8 for me was begin again. And I think how blessed are we to be able to wake up every morning and make a new choice, to choose a new thing, to relish in a new idea. And choosing a new story and finding my faith allowed me to not just get a life, but decide how I want my work to change. I was like, oh, my work can change. I don't have to do the same thing every day. So with Oratory Glory, we shifted gears. They used to always call us like a communication consultancy, a communication agency, and everybody was like, can you help us with our strategic communications plan? And I was like, no, that's actually not really what I mean. So we flipped the language, and Oratory Glory is a human development agency. And we exist to create experiences and goods and resources that help people to realize their potential. And in developing my own learning and development plan, I think there's 3 core categories that we're missing when we think about what the development of people is. There's communication and relationships, there's process and ideation, and there's leadership and self-development. And so all of the experiences that we design under Oratory Glory now fall under those things. And Tell Me About Yourself is the introductory experience, because it's like before you try and jump to the other stuff, what's your response when people are like, what do you do? Or tell me about yourself, or what do you like, right? There's so many different directions that you can go. And so this year, our focus is on growing the experience that we've launched with We Present and doing pop-up experiences in different communities to make sure that artists and entrepreneurs who don't work a typical day-to-day job have the access to resources like these. The second piece of what we're focusing on now at Oratory Glory is forming a speaker collective. I've been to far too many events and conferences where there are like 2.5 women speaking, or there are no people of color, or the only people of color or women are the folks performing. And it's like, okay, we can express our talent in many different ways. And so for me, when I think about what the future of work and education and learning and change look like, the faces are varied. And so for the speaker collective that we're developing, the focus is really on training emerging leaders on how to facilitate transformative experiences that shift dialogue, that change people's perspectives, and that bring people closer to their purpose. There's 3 big projects that I'm working on within Oratory Glory. The third is a new business venture that my partner and I are thinking through. And this question always comes up for us: are you ready to be well? And I know we can work ourselves to the bone, and we talk about self-care. It's like a sexy thing now, right? But how are we taking care of ourselves, mind, body, and spirit is something that's always top of mind for us. And so when we think about, and when I think about, how do I make sure that people don't end up in that find your faith stage? How do I make sure that entrepreneurs and creatives and artists are taking care of the whole person? So we came up with Sealy and Squeak. And it's a farm that we're buying. I'm very excited that we're buying a farm. And the idea is, how do we make the future now? And this is our first physical manifestation of what that looks like. So we're turning this 11-acre farm into a spiritual center, into a collaborative learning space, and into just a retreat space where people can come and like not work, like actually just not work for a change. And I can talk about that. Who was that? It was like, yeah. And is it what? No, it's not in Atlanta, but the big picture vision for us is like, we need spaces like these all over the place. I think my biggest joy is in disrupting what learning can look like for the creative class. And when I say creative class, I mean everyone. Like, creativity is something that lives in all of us. There's at least an ounce of creativity that goes into all of your work. So this will be our next venture to make sure that as people are like skilling themselves up, they're also taking care of the whole person. And I can talk on and on and on about that all night, but that is not what the intention of this conversation was. The intent was, when we're thinking about love, right? Figuring out the things that we would die for and living for them instead, vulnerably, courageously, and unconditionally, what does that look like for us within these lessons? And as we think about how we want to show up for change, and I know we're going to talk about this all night over dinner, and we're going to have some questions after this also, but I want to leave you all with 3 questions. How will you own your voice? Where will you inject love? And if you haven't already, when will you begin again? Because we know what the socio-political climate is now, and the acts of love that we commit to now are more important than they've ever been in our lifetime. So let's get to work. Thank you.
That was awesome. Isn't she awe-inspiring? So I'm not sure I was clear enough on my kind of explaining what Makers is, but Makers is all about change makers, and Holley is a change maker, which was why she needed to be our first speaker. Yeah. And actually, all of you are here because someone at Mailchimp thought you are a change maker. So kudos to all of you for being here. Yeah. Does anyone have questions for Holley? Any questions for Holley? What's that?
Oh,
when does the farm open?
To be determined. We're in the process of purchasing said farm. We found the land, we love it, it's in Winston-Salem, and now we're like, yes, that's not far. And you're all invited.
Yes.
So our goal for the farm launch is by 2020, but if you go to sealyandsqueak.org, you can stay in the loop. They're characters from The Color Purple, by the way.
Will there be baby goats?
Oh my goodness. Have you met my wife? Oh my gosh. She's obsessed with goats.
Anyone that knows me, I love baby goats.
Do you have baby goats?
No, I live in the city, but I want them back.
You can have, wife? I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Don't bring a baby goat to the office.
Don't encourage me.
There will be baby goats.
You have a question, Ramona?
Yes, Brooklyn.
Get it?
Wait, Harlem is here too? Wait, what? This is good. Ooh, I
She's
love
Brooklyn.
that thing.
So my question was where you started your journey with the school tours. Do you maintain connectivity with those schools still?
That's a great question. The short answer is no. And that was the biggest area where we failed, because it's so hard to keep in touch with schools with changeover. We did in the early years, but no, not long term we didn't.
Holley, I'm just wondering, when you talk about story, I find that there's a lot of power in story, especially when we talk about today and the environment we live in, to create change, and you move through release and recovery through story. And I'm wondering what your experience and thoughts about taking the power of story to the next level to create an environmental change beyond the personal change.
Ooh. When you say environmental, you mean?
Politically,
Oh, yes.
culturally, I mean, impacting beyond the personal.
Yeah, I think it's super important. I think events like this are a great way. I think the danger of stories is that when they just live online, they're in a bubble. And I think we're in a digital age now where some people are afraid to come offline. And it's like the sharing of the story is important, but the exchange is what's even more important, right? So I think creating more spaces like these, and I think remembering that story always needs to be followed by action. Story allows us to connect, but it's like, okay, now that we're connected and we see eye to eye and we're aligned on this, what are we going to do about it? So I think it's important to hold each other accountable around like, oh, this is good. Now let's create some steps. And I think that buzz is happening here with you know who in office. Yeah.
So I'm a veterinarian, and I was invited here by Kirsten, so I really appreciate that. But I'm familiar with the concept that loving others well is a life mission for me personally, and I hear that that is your mission as well. But my question to you is, as a giving and serving person, what do you do to take care of yourself so that you can continue to love others well?
That's a good shimmy question. Got a shimmy on that question. When I talked about the find your faith and allow your story to change questions, I've been pouring from an empty vessel for a long time, right? And I think I started to feel myself get angry, like, oh man, why am I so? And my wife is like, what did you do for yourself today? And I'm like, oh, you're right. And I had to flip that. And it's definitely still a work in progress, but I love to sing. I love to write songs. And I'm learning it's the little things, right? It's not like I need to go out and bike for 4 hours today. Like, I don't have the room. My life is not set up where I can bike 4 hours a day. God bless me if that is my thing. But I love to write. I love to just listen to new albums and music. I love to cook. I have an apron at home. Like, I literally, this is pretty gross, but it's cool. Because I trust you all. I had an apron, and I was just so overjoyed by the apron. I didn't wash the apron for like 2 years. I literally just threw this apron because I love like the flour that was on it and the foods that I cooked. I was like, I made this. So making with my hands is a way. I love to research things. That makes me really happy, to learn new things and share new things. I would say those are the core ways: listening to music, singing, writing, cooking, and going to botanical gardens. I'm obsessed with just being by bodies of water and green things. I would say working out, but that's a lie. I don't. Bless those of you who enjoy like exercise. I think it's good for the body. But when I do sweat or dance, oh, I love to dance. But like shower dance, like not like go to the club dance, but just like turn the music up and get a good dance out. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not going to throw it. I'm not. Are you sure?
Oh. The throw it chant.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for coming. My name is Shanita of Melanin.tech, and so my thing is I'm very perpetual, and I'm also one of those people who believe I can change the world. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, how do you know when to stop? And like when you have an idea and it's okay to stop on that and focus on that for a while? Because I'm struggling.
Yeah. With like trying to blow it up even more, or you're working on like 17 ideas right now?
Both. I have about 20 different ideas, and also
Okay.
the idea that I do have, the company I have now, I just want to keep adding things. I want to keep, adding more value, but I know I have to focus on certain things first and then expand after. But I just don't know how to stop.
Yeah, you gotta hit that hand slap. So there's a couple things. One is my process for going from idea to execution is always dream it up, write it down, and in the writing it down, I talk to God about it. Phone a friend. Decide what's feasible. That's the key step right there. Decide what's feasible, like in iteration 1 of the idea, what am I gonna do? Make a plan and then get to work. Between the deciding what's feasible, making a plan, and getting to work, just stick with that plan.
Okay.
And find a tribe around you who can help you stick with the idea. The second thing is, this is the best piece of advice that I got as an entrepreneur, is fall in love with the problem, not the solution, right? When you're so obsessed with, this is the best idea, and that's not you seeking change, that's an ego thing. And that's something I've run into. I'm like, no, this idea, I gotta, hold on, it's sexy, it's on this big sheet, but did you do the thing, right? So what's the problem that you're seeking to solve? What's one small action we can take? Because change doesn't have to be big at first. Like, it ripples, it becomes big, like a seed that we plant, right? So that process, and fall in love with the problem, not the solution.
All right. Thank you. All right. Where is this going next? So gentle. Getcha.
I've got a question too, but I will go down if you come up. You sure? Okay. Thank you for your story and your spirit. If you were to look into your eyes as your 14-year-old self and could say one sentence, what would you say to yourself, your 14-year-old self?
These things take time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'll explain why, because I'm like the fellow New Yorkers in here know, you learn by trade, it's like fast, 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 everything needs to go, like, and that speed is like not sustainable. And if you're trying to do something that's bigger than you, it's gonna take a team, and it's going to take a while.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. This makes me so nervous what I'm going to do.
The dog mom in me is like, it's dangerous, don't. I know, squishy.
Hello. No, it was fine. It was good. Hello. Hi. So I'm going to gather that this probably hasn't happened to you too often because you seem pretty driven. You seem like you have an idea, you chase it, you go after it. But for those of us that might struggle with this more often, when you're creative and you have multiple creative outlets and you get stuck in that place where you're like, I don't know which way to go because I have too many things that I have. So unlike the idea of when to stop, it's when you get in that very stagnant space because you feel frozen by all the multiple creative ideas coming at you at one time. Do you have any advice for those of us that experience that on how you just kind of kickstart yourself and just commit? Because I know for me personally, I have, currently there's an idea that I have, I'm very, very committed to the outcome, but I get stuck in the creative process. And it's like I'm squirrel. I'm like, I'm over here, I'm over here, I'm over there, I'm down, up, everywhere. But I actually want to stay focused. Do you have any advice for those of us who struggle with that?
Yeah, we're not all Virgos. I mean, you and I are Virgos.
Yeah, I'm a Pisces. I don't know what that means, but as a Pisces,
I'm a Pisces
like back and forth.
I'm a Pisces moon. What does the stuckness look like?
Oh, here.
Okay, the stuckness looks like I'm literally frozen. Like I have too many creative outlets, so rather than actually dive into one idea and move forward with it, I just spend 2 hours on Instagram or watch some, like binge watch a Netflix series because I can't motivate myself to get into, because it's a commitment. It's like diving into one, and when you dive into one creative outlet, it's at the expense of another outlet that's also pulling you in that direction.
Okay. I will say that I know that feeling as someone who has books and books of ideas, and there are moments where I'm like, let me start this, and I've started 7 things in an hour, so I feel you. Bless you. It's hard. 2 things. 1, be still. And I hate being still, but there's something to learn in the stillness and the stuckness that will give you clues on what you need to be working on next. And the second thing is just decide one thing you want to do. A great piece of advice I got is, like, on your to-do list for the day, pick 2 things. And it has been game-changing for me. Like, you can only really finish 2 big things in a day, right? So one of my coaches is like, pick something to do in the morning and something to do in the afternoon. And the liberation that I feel from not, like, being in competition with myself over my to-do list, I'm like, there's only 5 things, let's add 7 more things. And when we cross one off, we're gonna add one back on, right? Like, that's not productive, that's busyness, that's survival busyness, right? So decide 2 things. You have a lifetime to do your creative stuff. Pick 2 things a day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and also therapy, because my therapist,
Thank you.
get a bomb therapist. I love that everybody's like, yes, get a therapist, get a therapist.
We want to do one more question we can, otherwise we're getting tight on time. Somebody back here?
Yes, Anne, way to
You probably get this a lot, but I'm so curious. What are the 6 ways to introduce yourself?
Oh, you want the 6 steps.
I do.
Well, guess what? You're going to get her book and figure it out. That's
You
Oprah
get a
minute.
book, and you get a book.
Nice setup, by the way. That's great. All right, Holley's staying with us for dinner, so hopefully you'll get a chance to talk with her after dinner. But before we leave for dinner, I wanted to share a quote directly from makers. So Marty called me last night to get me all pumped up at his event and was telling me how great it was. And she said, what what they said last night that really got her, it's not up to some of us to create the change. It's going to take all of us. So all of us that's in this room, including the men in this room. So if you're a maker's man in this room, can you please stand up? I think there's about 8 of you. I see you. Well, Makers is definitely a feminist platform. We need men and allies to help us get there. So thank you for being here, and you're here because we see that in you.